here's
how
the
Disney
point.
ruined Star Wars.
No, here's the point I want
Bad.
to make.
Mm.
Okay.
Rogue One is the best movie that Disney has put out
Yes,
since obtaining Star Wars.
Okay.
but
The best Star Wars movie that they put out since obtaining the property.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
how many
Okay.
Star Wars movies have they put out?
Oh, 4? No, 5.
No.
Han
5.
Solo.
Yeah.
5. Force
1 for 5
Awakens.
is
The Last
20%.
Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker. Oh,
What's up, Scott?
Not to mention the miss on half of their shows.
Yeah, I was gonna say five
Mm.
movies, and then what? Like 4 shows now, I think.
Mandalorian's been a win. I would say Ahsoka and Kenobi, very good.
Okay.
I
How
haven't
was
seen-
Acolyte? I haven't watched.
I haven't
it.
seen Ahsoka, so I
I
can't
wasn't
speak
mad
on
at the
that.
Acolyte. I was not mad at the Acolyte at all. There was a ton. There's like visceral like hate and disgust towards
I'll
the
say
Acolyte.
Twitter had a very different approach to
Dude,
to
social was.
Acolyte.
But here's some wins from the Acolyte. The choreography incredible. I like the
Okay.
actors. I like the time period. Some of the dialogue for sure. Like it's a bit like they could have written that better.
Somehow Palpatine is alive.
But, well, that's been an issue for a while. So, but yeah, my case, and I think it's a strong one, is that Rogue One is the best project they have put out since obtaining the rights. So.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the only original project that they put out since obtaining the rights. So, I mean, I guess
7 through 9 were basically copies of episodes 4 through 6, just worse.
Yeah. Well,
Like I will not forgive what they did in episode 9. That is enough to completely ruin all of Star Wars for me.
yeah.
Scott said that the people who don't like Acolyte are the same people who don't like Rings of Power that are Lord of the Rings fans. That I don't know. Maybe that's true. I gotta say, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a fan of the movies. I'm a fan of the books. I'm a fan of all of Tolkien's like source material, and I'm a pretty big fan of Rings of Power. If I'm honest.
Yeah, I gotta get caught up on it. So there's definitely
Hello,
on my
Morgan. Hello, Zach. Hello, Esau. Welcome everybody in.
Yeah.
Just going
What's
a
up?
couple more minutes here. We're talking about. Feel free to drop in the comments debating whether Disney has done a good job with Star Wars or not.
Yeah. Well, what
Here's-
started it was this mug that I typically drink from.
Mm.
Surprisingly, just kind of vibes with the fit today. And then I pointed out,
It's the original
artwork.
poster art.
Yeah.
and then what George Lucas before was called the lightsaber, he called it a laser sword, guys. It's just it's a laser sword and kyber crystal.
Here's my thing. I think Mandalorian was a season too long. I think they had success with the first season and felt the need to drag it on, and the second season was a miss.
Ooh.
Whoa, season 2, the finale of season 2.
That's my opinion.
That's fine. That's
Like,
just
like
the
take for
opinion's
example,
wrong.
Obi-Wan. Great story, great storytelling.
Okay.
Only needed one season. And they just let it be. Mando felt like a little bit more of like they needed to find something to make up for the horribleness of the movies, and they tried to add more on top of it, and that kind of ruined the story for me.
Just
Boba Fett was trash. I hated that show. I was so disappointed in how they did Boba Fett.
Let me say this. First, Kenobi was good because it was originally a movie script. Mandalorian season 2 gave us Luke Skywalker in his prime. Are you kidding me? So good, so good. And then
Did I miss something? Did season 2? I mean, he just appears, right? Like it's not like he's like we're following him for multiple episodes, right?
oh no, he just shows up at the end.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
Deals
yeah,
with Moff Gideon
yeah.
and helps rescue Grogu. It's so good.
I'm not saying it was bad. I enjoyed, but it felt like they were stretching the story out more than they
Yeah.
needed to.
Yeah,
It
I'm
felt
with that.
unnecessary.
I'm with that. Yeah. Andor, yes.
Andor was great. I will
Ileana the
acknowledge how
Prophet for
great
sure.
Andor
And
is.
we haven't even got into Andor. Andor is perfect storytelling in my book.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah, it's so
perfect
good.
storytelling.
Bro, it is slow and it is so good.
It is a
Okay.
very slow burn. It
Yeah.
is. I remember the first time I was watching through Andor, I reached a certain point in the season where I was like, oh, this must be the end, and I was only halfway through the show. So it is a very slow burn,
Yeah.
but it is 100% worth the watch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna deftly segue us. Was it in fact beautiful?
Oh, I would for
Well,
sure.
yes, actually, to
For
just kind
sure.
of
Okay.
crowbar today's reading into that one.
Yeah, there's so many moments of Andor where it's beautiful. The escape scene when they get out of the prison, and I don't want to ruin too much, but there's that moment in one of the characters' face where, in order for him to fully experience freedom and escape, he has to do something that he doesn't know how to do.
Mhm.
And then you see it in his face that he actually isn't going to make it, even though he's like sacrificed so much for everyone else to make it. It is beautiful. Like it's, oh man,
Yeah.
moment of silence. And then the funeral scene at the end, that sparks resistance is just, it's so good.
This is going to turn into instead
we
of a virtual book club, it's going to be like a film and TV show club where
I'm here for it. I'm not
instead
gonna
of
lie.
reading, we're going to watch film and shows throughout
Mhm.
our week and discuss their cultural and spiritual implications.
I'm so down. I'm so down.
If you are just joining us, welcome to Sandals Church Virtual Book Club. We are reading Fathered by God by John Edlredge. Today we're going to be discussing chapters 6 and 7. Today we are joined by our good friend and coworker Tyler. Tyler, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I was gonna say super good and then really well, and I don't know. Those got train wrecked in my head, but I'm doing really well. This weekend was a little rough for me. I struggle with migraines, and I had one on Sunday, and I was super bummed because we had one of our online Sandals Church Online members get licensed as a minister, and I was really looking forward to like being here to support Trisha, and I was down for the count, and it bummed me out, but we had yesterday off, and I was able to sort of recoup and kind of hit the ground running this morning, but now I'm dragging at the end of the day here. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, nothing is worse than a Tuesday that feels like a Monday. And that is mentally where I've been at. Everything has just been dragging, and I think I have more time in my week, and it's Tuesday already, which means I'm halfway through, and I'm tapped out. And that kind of feeds into what I was sharing with you guys earlier. I think there are great nuggets in this book. If John can get to the point in maybe like 15 less pages, I would be enjoying this a lot more. I don't know if anybody else has experienced this. If you're experiencing this in the chat, let me know so I don't feel like the only one. I'm struggling to get through some of these chapters, even though I'm enjoying my reading. How has it been for you guys? We're now more than halfway through this book. Next week will be our last meeting. How are you feeling up to this point?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, like I think the last chapter 5 on the warrior, I believe it was, like I finally figured out the flow and it helped the process of taking it in. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I've read this book so many times that it's pretty easy for me to read, only because it's more like refreshing for me than it is like sort of trying to like chew on it for the first time. But yeah, I mean, John Edlredge is definitely known for waxing poetically. He and you know, as a I've done some editing before in the past professionally, and you know, my editor's eye definitely sees like, oh man, chop a lot out, kill your darlings, as like the poets might say. But yeah, I don't know. I like what he has to say enough. And I think having read it enough times that I'm able to sort of like sift through the stories that I know maybe aren't as impactful to the point.
Yeah. That's what keeps me coming back, is like by the time I get to the end of the chapter, I'm like, wow, this is great. I loved everything I've gained out of this. But if it could have been with like 2 less stories, I think that would have helped. Zach said on Facebook that if we start a film and show review show, that we need to start with all the movies Eldredge mentions in this book.
We'll
go through all of his movies first.
Yeah, that'd be a lot. This one he mentions, he references Antoine Fisher in the Lover chapter. So
yeah,
Great
Talked about
film.
Gladiator a couple times.
Yeah, Gladiator.
We had a callback to
McKay's
what's the
Gladiator.
McCase?
Yeah, I'm trying not to skip the haterade, Scott.
we had a callback to Kingdom of Heaven, another killer
Oh
film.
yeah. Mhm.
And another callback to Lion King, one
Yeah.
of McKay's favorites of all time.
Yes, I will acknowledge I do love the Lion King references.
Yeah.
Not Nasi in the chat
Nasi,
said
yeah.
they took my men's small group through this book last year, one of the best books we've ever done together. I think that is a great situation to like read this in. Is like I've enjoyed reading it with our team and the guys and the girls on our team to hear what they're getting out of it and how it's been helping them understand what it means to follow God as a man. I think it's been pretty awesome. So
Yeah, that's great.
So today like I said earlier, we're talking about chapters 6 and 7, the lover and the king. Long chapters, but I think they were so dense and rich. I can't get past, dude. It took me so long because I was already behind, and so I was like just struggling to get through this. But I really enjoyed the lover chapter.
Yeah.
Let's start us there. One of the first things that really caught my eye at the very beginning, and I think John did a really good job at using to segue from the warrior into the lover. On page 123 in my copy, he says, "The great danger for the warrior is not defeat, but success. As I said before, what the evil one does to a good warrior, if he cannot take him out, cannot keep him from entering the battle at all, is to bury him. Dogpile him, make it all about battle, make it constant." And I thought that was such an interesting way to transition from like highlighting the good of one season of manhood, while also not being willing to transition into the next.
Right. Right.
I feel like that's where so many guys are at nowadays. What did you guys think?
Yeah, I thought it was really important. I mean, on that same page, we must not let the battle become everything. So I like I don't even know if I would use the word balance that John brings, but I think just a holistic understanding of what it means to become ourselves as men, to understand God as he is too, right? Both a warrior, but also a lover. He introduces this idea of God wooing us, or God being the great romancer, which I think is a really great thought for us to maybe think about, because we do rightly want to speak and approach God with adoration, reverence, a sense of wonder, but he is for sure the great lover, and all that he has given his creation to enjoy in terms of love and beauty and the arts and even passion and romance. All of those things are a reflection of him. Like, he's the great giver of those gifts. And so I think it was just fascinating for John to kind of frame God as the great romancer. And he, as he tells that story about finding the rock in the stream, and it was in the shape of a heart, and he was, feeling like as if God was wooing him and calling him in to this next stage, I think is so important. So I think it was even important that John kind of framed and set up this chapter intentionally after the warrior. I think it was so important. So
yeah, I mean, by the way, let me know in the chat. I heard that, or I read that comment from Scott and Morgan that the mic was feeding back or clipping, and I turned my gain down. Let me know if that solved the problem. But yeah. I think I think it's, he and John kind of touches on this a little bit in the lover chapter. I think there is something really interesting to the reality that it feels sometimes weird, I think, for us to really see God as a lover of us. And I think especially as men, as we, normally, I think we think about, Jesus came to earth as a human man, and we think about God the Father. I think that there's a little bit of maybe I don't know, something weird about us maybe seeing God as a lover, someone who's pursuing us. But I really think it's important. And I also think too, one of the things he says in the first couple of pages is he's kind of, painting a picture of an experience he had. And he says something to the effect of that he had to allow beauty some room. And I think for us as men, I think that so often, when we have a hard time really seeing God as someone who is pursuing us and very, I think in a lot of ways, very romantic toward us, that like we oftentimes it's really because we're not allowing room there. We're not allowing room to be able to take in beauty and therefore see the beauty of that God's given and created for us. He talks about there's like a whole paragraph where he explains how a river looked, and he found this rock. And I just highlighted that whole section, and for me, I'm like, man, how often do I really take the time to let myself take in whatever scene I'm in to that degree that I could, in my memory, that I could go back and recount all of the little details of what that looked like and felt like and smelled like. And I think I just get too busy to let myself experience the beauty that he's created and experience the ways that he's maybe wooing me,
Yeah, definitely. Before we segue, we got a comment from Facebook from Reggie asking for some prayer. Reggie, we would definitely love to pray for you. You don't give us much context, but that's totally okay. Fredo, would you mind just praying over Reggie and what he needs, whatever he may need in this moment?
Yeah, of course. God, we just commit our brother Reggie to you and whatever he's working through. As he said, he just stands in need of prayer significantly. And so we intercede on his behalf. Would you be the great provider to him? Would you show yourself faithful to him, the healer to him? And may your spirit give him comfort in whatever he's dealing with. And so we're grateful that he's here and that he reached out. And so God, would you show up and provide and fill in that gap in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Reggie, thank you for jumping in. Like Morgan said in the chat, feel free if you need to talk to someone or need some more assistance, email us at online@sandalschurch.com.
Yeah.
That goes to our entire online team. We would love to connect with you and walk through this journey with you. Switching back a little bit, Scott asked a great question where he asked, what are some experiences or moments where you're deeply moved by beauty? How do these experiences influence your heart and soul?
Oh, man.
For the sake of maintaining the nature conversation, I remember not this past winter, but the winter before that, I was up at senior retreat with a bunch of our students. And if you're from Southern California, you know how rare it is to see snow in most places, let alone actual snowfall. And the last day of senior retreat, we're getting ready to leave up in Idlewild Pines, and it started to snow on the last day. And it was a really cool experience because it was like this ushering our seniors into the rest of the year, into their like, hey, you're now stepping out of youth into adulthood and what God is calling you into. And it was such a rare moment for everyone there. That is a very beautiful kind of experience. Now, I was also quickly trying to get off the mountain because I drove my small little car up there and I had no snow tires or chains. So I needed to get away from the snow. But it was cool to kind of have that moment of like, there's just a certain stillness that comes over snowfall that was pretty beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, I'll keep with the nature thing and then go to just maybe even like a personal, like person-to-person thing. Driving back from Louisville, Kentucky, where Ash and I lived for a number of years, we stopped at the Grand Canyon. Neither one of us had been there. And so on our way back to California, we made a quick pit stop there, and it was just magnificent. Whatever day we chose, it wasn't like packed, surprisingly. And I remember just the closer we got to the lookout point that we selected, like there was just this fullness of like silence that just like came over like my ears. Like what I was hearing was like silence, but it was like this, like a massive kind of silence. And then as my eyes kind of just start to take in the sight and the just the grandeur of this place was just like, it was overwhelming, to be very honest. Like it was overwhelming because it's so vast and it's so deep The colors are like so rich, you know. It's like every color and shade of red and brown and gray, and like, and then the richness of the blue sky. Like I was so moved, you know. And it was quite a moment. I think Ash and I just kind of stood there quietly for like a ton of moments, just taking it in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like so refreshing to feel really small again, because we had been in a season of moving. I got a new job. We were moving back to California. Our car was packed. There was just so much on my mind, you know, like just overwhelmed with all the things that I was going through, the things I had to get done. And just being in front of there was just, it was something really beautiful to take in. So, and even just a reminder that I think I needed to grow in my vocabulary of how to describe things that are beautiful. Like I
Yeah.
think I still need to do that as a man, is like really develop a vocabulary that rightly captures and helps express the beauty that I'm taking in from time to time. So yeah.
I can think of 3 examples that I'm just going to go really briefly touch on each of the 3. One was one of my really good friends was doing his doctorate up in Eugene, Oregon. And driving through, like he was like, "Oh, let's just go on a drive," and just getting into the hills of Oregon, just sort of like above the forest line kind of a thing. It just took my breath away. And I remember saying in that moment to him, like, man, I feel like I just found where my heart lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just felt so beautiful, and I felt so connected to it, and I felt so grateful in that moment. I was like, you know, hey, do you mind? Like, I want to throw on a song, and I threw on like a worship song that really meant a lot to me at the time, and we just kind of like sat in that moment together, and that was just really beautiful, and beautiful in a way that really like lifted my eyes up in a way, like to God. But I think also about, you know, like I am really high 4 on the Enneagram. McKay, I think you're pretty high 4 as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of my like favorite things, and one of the things that really reminds me so much of God, is the beauty that I find in people, and the uniqueness that I find in people. Like anytime I have like a really, really deep conversation, and I even think about, you know, they don't necessarily all have to happen, you know, in like really intense ways, but you know, just as a team, we were just out and had like kind of a day like out on some little electric boats out on the bay nearby us
A
in the
little
harbor,
Duffy,
a little Duffy,
a little putt
and
putt.
and then went out to lunch. And some of the conversations that I got to have, and to see like the uniqueness of different people, really feels exceptionally like beautiful to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third that I'll just bring up, I'm a big reader, and I love movies as well. And like a good book or a good movie can really, I don't know, I just see beauty in that art. And it's almost always for me like a really transcendent like experience, something that I feel like, um, yeah, like, you know, John talks about like the mystics, the Christian mystics a lot in
Mm-hmm.
this. I identify with that a little bit,
Yeah.
and I feel that sort of like connection to God in really small doses, through like not only his artwork in nature, but the artwork of his people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved, for lack of a better way to describe it, in the Lover chapter, is he spent a pretty good amount of time talking less about physical love, sexual love, and spent a good amount of time talking through experiencing beauty and love through God's creation and through the things that we get to experience in platonic relationships, and
Yeah.
um, just being in the creation that God has given us. Like, even as we're talking about this, another one of my favorite memories now of recognizing beauty was earlier this year. Viv and I were at Disneyland California Adventure. She was still pregnant with Zion. She had not yet given birth yet, so we were there trying to walk around and try to induce some labor. And I remember we were walking through Cars Land, and it was like right around dusk. And this to me is one of my favorite memories now is if you've been to DCA, they always have like a big kind of moment around turning the lights on, all the neon lights around Cars Land. And it starts with that song "Life Could Be a Dream." Do you get it? Know what song I'm talking about from the Cars movie? Anyway, they play that song. It's a very loving, kind of romantic song. But I remember walking through there, all these lights coming on, and getting to experience a place that Viv and I have loved so much and have spent a lot of our dates and our time together. And recognizing that this was the end of a season of just the two of us, but also the ushering in of a new season for the both of us.
Wow.
And so getting to just like experience that kind of location where it's like not necessarily nature, but it is something that is communal, allows us to be around others while also celebrating the fact that it's been such a special place for the two of us.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
That's really cool, McKay. Thanks for sharing that with us, man.
Yeah.
Didn't realize I was going to share that. That kind of. Anyway.
That's good. That's exactly. I think we're trying to embody, what we're discovering from the chapter around, throwing yourself into places of beauty, even as a way to grow out of habits that have enslaved people. John was pretty clear in this chapter around even sexual sin and having to confront that in a very serious way. And then asking God to reframe your understanding of beauty, like being captivated by him, being captivated by his world, by people again, in a way that is liberating and not objectifying, to them or to you. So I think, that's a beautiful example. So, and really good.
Morgan asked a cool question. Fredo, you had mentioned earlier that you felt like you needed to develop a better vocabulary for beauty.
Yeah.
And Morgan was just kind of asking, like, how do you even do that? I think for me, and I don't think that this is necessarily true for everyone, but I think for me, I feel much more able to like articulate what I'm thinking or feeling when I'm doing a good job of like reading other people's words. I think other people's words can like kickstart that part of my brain. And this is like, it's such especially for men, I feel like, but I think for all people right now, like we've pretty well abandoned poetry as a culture. And I think that the only way that we have that kind of vocabulary, for me at least, I guess I won't speak for everyone, but for me, it's poetry. And I'll throw out, it may be tough to find. I don't know anymore. But an author, his name's F.W. Borum, Boream.
F.W. Borum.
F.W. Borum is one of the best Christian writers that I know that is also really poetic. So he speaks to the heart of being a Christian and to the heart of the Christian. I highly recommend reading him. Anytime I'm feeling maybe like dry, especially like when I'm if the idea of beauty is like upsetting to me for some reason, I probably need to get more in touch with my heart. And F.W. Borum is a quick way to that for me.
That's a great practice, man. I'm so glad you mentioned him too, because I'm not one for devotionals, but I have like religiously read through F.W. Borum's works. So he's artistic, he's poetic, he's succinct too. And I don't know if he even intends to be devotional, but he is. Like he'll open with a sentence that feels so random, and then come back to it in 7 pages and you're like, oh my God, that's a whole new way to see the scriptures. Like it's beautiful. He's really, really good. So I have some of his first editions too. They're like falling apart. Yeah, they're fantastic. So anyone wants to read them, I'll bring some into the office. But Morgan, great question. So I think for me, it started when I started reading less Christian theology books, right? That would be the first place. Just started to try to read more widely. One person on my list to get into is Flannery O'Connor, the great American author. I think she was also a poet. So I have it on my my to-do list before this year ends to read through some of her short stories. So yeah, I think just trying to read widely, and then something else I'm trying to do is like find like go slow in some of the ordinary tasks. So for example,
Mm.
I have been experiencing a revival at the grocery store, y'all. Like going grocery shopping to my local Stater Brothers has been a great, enjoyable practice, and I
Mhm.
just I try to go slow through ordinary things and end up finding something like really beautiful about that. So, and oftentimes it happens around looking for something I can't find for like 10 minutes in the grocery store, and just yeah, I don't know, just trying to go a bit slower. So, and it's even something John mentions in the chapter too. Like we go too fast, we don't slow
Mhm.
down to pay attention to the beautiful things that are around us. So, yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
grocery revival, bro. It's a real thing. I would have never expected it, but yeah,
Fredo, one of the things that Eldridge writes is that the lovers awaken when a man comes to see that the poetic is far truer than the prepositional or
yes,
propositional
yes.
and analytical. I think for
Page
me,
that on.
when
Ooh.
I'm not sure because I have it on like iBooks, so I have it digitally, so I change the size, so my page numbers are always different than your guys's. I screw myself on that one. So but it's early on in the lover.
132, McKay.
There you
Thank
go.
you very much.
132. Thank you. um I know for me, like, you know, I think about like there was definitely a moment where I kind of switched from like Hemingway and Kerouac being like some of my favorite like authors, you know, my favorite people to read, to people like Rudyard Kipling and like Borum and people who were a little bit more poetic. And I started to see like poetry actually being true, not just, you know, like something like flowery.
Yeah.
uh was there a moment for you guys where like something that like either reading or like a, you know, film or an experience that you felt like you were like, oh man, now I'm starting to see beauty as being more than just like form, that there's something really deep to it?
Yeah, when I was a high school teacher, I would like rack my brain around trying to like persuade students to the truth of Christianity and how to like
Mm,
not just explain to them Christian truth, but get them to receive it. And I realized that so much of my apologetic approach was around just giving analytical data, you know,
mm,
reasonable facts, things that like felt persuasive, but were primarily logical. And then it really struck me that like no one, and I mean none of us make decisions like that. And I started to think about
Yeah.
the reason why I came to love my wife Ashley and to make her my wife wasn't because I had all of the analytics in front of me. There's no
Mhm.
way. It was because we were randomly on a date at Disneyland that wasn't even supposed to be a date. We were stopped over by Thunder Mountain, and the fireworks are going off. We're both standing on top of a bench trying to get a best view, and just the way the firework light was bouncing off her face and her hair,
mm,
just, I had a moment of beauty where what I rationally understood is I want to be with her, to the beauty of that moment with her led to a sense of clarity that I want to marry this woman. And then
Mm.
it struck me like that's how we make decisions. Like we rarely make decisions purely on logical reasoning. And so Tyler,
mm,
you're absolutely onto something, that I think it's like a reason plus beauty, and then you get a kind of clarity from those two things, right? So
mm,
I'm trying to
Mhm.
remember what author said it, but they really said you come to embrace something and make it your own when both your left side of the brain and the right side of the brain come together.
Yeah.
And I think that's the moment of like awakening where something is not just true, but it's like profoundly beautiful and true at the same time, you know? And so I think for me, realizing like that's how we make big decisions
Mhm.
was like, oh, this is how I want to start to actually explain the gospel and explain Christian truth, you know, in such a
what
way that's, yeah.
And
one of my favorite, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna cut in again, I'm sorry, McKay, I feel
no,
like
you're
I've
okay.
stepped on you like 3 or 4 times.
No, you're okay.
It reminds me of did you guys ever see the movie Dead Poet Society?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
uh one of the things that he like brings the boys into the huddle, and he says that like medicine, business, engineering, that he says that they're noble and necessary for sustaining life,
Such a
but
good scene.
poetry, love, beauty, these are what we stay alive for.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I think that it's that pairing that you're talking about, Fredo. It's the yeah, these things are important, you know, and they're good and they're necessary. But they're not what we stay alive for.
Right. Right. And I think that's the wounding in the lack of the lover being developed in any man, is that they haven't awakened to that quite yet. Like they see the world primarily as, you know, all reason, or they see the world still as a warrior does. Everything is a battle. Everything's a fight that you got to dive into, you know, and they just, for all kinds of reasons, have missed that joining together of both, you know, what is true, but also what is like beautiful and worth admiring for the sake of it just being beautiful, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, Zach shared on Facebook. He said, I appreciate his thoughts on how the lover is breathing in the fullness of life and with it reflecting God's nature as creator and enjoyer of excessive and unrelenting beauty, which beautiful way to put that, Zach. I thought how he positions the lover in that regard is both deep and helpful and is different from what many people think of as a lover.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to, this is going to feel a little bit of a segue, but I wanted to touch on this, Tyler, since we talked about it so much beforehand. Obviously, it's easy in this chapter to think of the lover as someone that gets married, has a spouse, you know, does the whole family thing.
Yeah.
You are a single man and have shared that you probably don't see yourself getting married.
Yeah.
How do you receive this chapter and some of these thoughts, knowing that that's probably not what your life has laid out for you?
Yeah, you know, I think it's funny. I think you know, I mentioned earlier that I'm hot, you know, have a lot of 4 on the Enneagram. The other thing that I have a lot of is the 2 on the Enneagram, which, you know, I think is like given me a very big heart, you know, a big loving heart. I tend to be, I mean, if you've ever caught me on my bad side, you know that like it can easily be the exact opposite. I can also be a very spiteful person. That's the brokenness of it, I guess. But the beauty is, you know, I think being a lover, yeah, I think, you know, in our English that carries a lot of connotation of, you know, romance and of sexual love. But I think that like God has, even though, you know, I don't necessarily feel like I probably will get married. I mean, I'm open to it, but I don't really see that in my future. But God still called me to love deeply, not only him, but all of the people in my life and all the people that he's created, even, you know, and even my enemies. You know, I think about, you know, people like, you know, we spend a lot of time in this book, talking about King David because, you know, he's a well written about character in the Bible and there's plenty of stories, you know, but one of the people, you know, when I think about this chapter, the lover and what God has created in all of us and called us to, I also think about David's friend, Jonathan, you know, who's, you know, pointed out as loving David like his own soul, and, you know, his soul being knit to the soul of David. And I think that, you know, the one of the greatest strengths that I have as a man that I get to bring into every relationship in my life is this capacity to love people uniquely and deeply, to care for them well, to be present for them emotionally and physically. And so as I read this chapter, I think there's a lot to be said for how we as men ought to love our wives. But I think there's just a lot there for us to, if we take it kind of a step back and read it with maybe a little bit more of an open lens. I think that this is so true of every relationship that we have. Our kids, our nieces and nephews, our brothers and sisters, yes, our wives, our fathers and mothers, and our friends. We have such an opportunity to reflect Jesus by being so pursuant of those people and loving those people well.
That's great.
That's so good, man. I'm just
I,
soaking
I
that
just
in
blacked
now.
out. I don't know. I just blacked out.
I just blacked
What
out.
did I say?
No, that was great. And I think it even, I promise to anyone watching, this wasn't planned out this way, but it ties in perfectly with what you taught this weekend on
Mm,
um, just the availability and the importance of singles in our church. You guys reflect just the satisfaction that is a life with Jesus, and being able to share that love with other people, I think is traditionally been undervalued. I think is a good way to
Absolutely.
place it, but
Yeah.
um, something that we need so deeply in all of our congregations and in all of our spaces. So
Right. Right.
thank you, man. Those are great thoughts. Another segue here, because I'm seeing the time and I don't want to take us too long. But you did mention King David, so let's
yeah.
transition over a little bit into the King chapters. Um,
If I'm good for anything, McKay, I'm good for segues. So.
Yeah, I'm gonna believe that wasn't intentional, but I think that was at the same time. So, Fredo, off camera, you shared some pretty good thoughts on the role of the king in the family, the calling into some of that. Would you mind sharing that with our chat and our viewers?
Yeah, I think John lays out this idea that to understand the stage of the king, you got to understand God's initial calling, really for Adam and Eve, but I think specifically for men in their invitation to rule and to embody God's power and kingship in their own life with their own power and influence and resources. And so there's really a whole theology of what it means to rule well, to rule as Christ rules. And so I really appreciated John doing that, laying it out for the man, particularly in this stage when you think about maybe the warrior who's returned home from battle, or the lover who's come back from his journey, and is beginning to settle. What does their household look like? What does their kingship look like? And how does it actually benefit the people who they love and serve, right? And so John, I think, did a fantastic job of talking about in this kingly stage, your life is really measured by your ability to share power and your ability to leverage power for the good of other people, which is, I think,
Mm-hmm.
a significant talking point in our world today, that Christians, and particularly Christian men, would embody power in such a way that allows other people to thrive, that allows other people to make decisions and help lead, I think is a good demonstration of stewardship, of humility. And so those were like some major takeaways for me, both in the chapter as it relates to my personal life, but also as we just think about men developing and becoming who God is calling them to be. So much of this stage is really, I think, marked by a healthy relationship, or even I say like a redeemed relationship to power,
Mm,
understanding that it's not necessarily just an evil or just something to be, pulled away from. Like I got to resist power because I don't trust myself with it, but really to redeem it for the name of Jesus, and to see how he stewarded as king, I think is really, really important. So he asked a great question. I don't have the specific page, but he asked, how does you having authority benefit others or serve others? And I think that was
Mm-hmm.
such a great way to think about this particular stage. So yeah, that was needed, definitely needed. So
I I loved what John had wrote on page 167 under the section "The Test of a King." At the
mm,
maybe the third paragraph, I think. Um, I'll just read the whole section. He said, "I'll be the first to admit this is proving one of the greatest tests of kingship in my own experience. I thought I discovered I was selfish when I married. You don't buy things simply because you want them. You don't think of tent as a wonderful place to sleep. To live in the constant company of another human being whose approach to life is different from the one you've been honing for years is an epiphany. Then children came along and brought the revelation to a whole new level. I had no idea how precious sleep was to me. Amen. Or moments of silence each day. Double amen. Treasures you can kiss goodbye when you shove off into parenthood. Even still, there seems to be inner resources available to help a man sacrifice when it comes to his family, though he might have to dig rather deep to find them on a daily basis."
mm,
And this is what kind of stuck out to me the most. Then I became a king, or at least I became into the stage of king, and discovered how very small the circle of my generosity naturally extends.
mm,
that's good.
Um, for better or for worse, I think a lot of my experience with this idea and role of a king is kind of what John was getting at. Like, how can I make life easier for myself? Um, And all of the kings we experience in the Bible, David and Jesus, live the most sacrificial lives.
Mhm.
And I think that's a major shift we have to kind of wrap our minds around as younger men entering into the stage of, sure, there's some greatness of being the quote unquote king of your domain, but how are you inviting the kingdom of God into that is
Yeah.
ultimately the bigger goal.
Yeah. I loved his markers too. Oh, sorry, Tyler. Were you going to say
No,
something?
go, jump in. Yeah.
When he talked about order, protection, and blessing. So a good
Hmm.
king in his kingdom is marked by a sense of order in the realm. So there's a kind of structure, there's a rhythm to the way that you lead and rule, and
Mm-hmm.
there's also a sense of protection for the life that's being cultivated under your care, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is huge. Right? Is my power or my use of power actually protecting people
Mm-hmm.
who are dependent upon me? And then he talks about blessing. I love that this
Mm-hmm.
idea of everyone around you is sharing in the prosperity that you have acquired,
Yeah.
versus which is so counter to what he talked about. Men when they get into their 40s and 50s just feel like they've paid their dues. Now it's time to enjoy. It's time to relax, kick back, take what is mine. Versus this idea of blessing, which is the pouring out of prosperity
Mm-hmm.
on those around you. I think is just it's such a radically different approach to life. And I think, for someone who's 38, gets me excited about that stage of life, like being a king and um, seeing that season of my life as one of pouring out, like still pouring out, rather than kind of
Mm-hmm.
just retreating all the time and resting, but like continuing to pour out blessing is great. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna totally Ben Parker us right now. So buckle up, everybody. But I think if the primary sort of pursuit or the primary concern of the lover is beauty, to notice beauty, to pursue beauty, and to admire and uphold beauty for what it is, then I think the primary concern of the king is really responsibility.
mm,
As men, in our cowboy and in our warrior phases, um, certainly responsibility is important, an important thing to learn. But our responsibility usually, like, there's a lot of room and grace for
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities
Mm-hmm.
when
yeah,
you're very young.
Yeah.
But as you really step into the role of a king, you have a tremendous amount of power, and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of scales from man to man, what how big that cone is of your
Mm-hmm.
power, of your authority. But we all have some, like John talks about. And like Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility,
Yeah.
responsibility to ourselves, responsibility to other people that we have some authority or power over, and ultimately responsibility to God for
Mm-hmm.
the authority that He gives us.
Yeah.
He if what's the Fredo, the sort of the biblical hierarchy, that Christ is the head of the church, and the husband the head of the family. That as he sort of like breaks that down, we all ultimately we're responsible to Jesus, to our King,
hmm
Mm-hmm.
for the power that He gives us.
Mm-hmm.
and
yeah,
and I think that I think in my life, as I've sort of had moments of responsibility where I've like done well with it, and when I think about the times I've done really poorly with it, um, I think as I get older, I feel more the weight of that responsibility. And as I get older, I feel more the like almost joy in that responsibility. Um,
mm,
that there's like, hey, that, like, this is a good thing, you know?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I was younger, I think I hated
Yeah.
responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
for sure, for
Yeah.
sure.
I think stepping into that, because I agree with that same sentiment. Now it's like holding responsibility is fulfilling in a sense of like, okay, like I can manage these things that I'm responsible for, and it is a calling upon men and really all people to handle what God has given you,
hmm hmm
and the power that He's entrusted in all of us. So I
Yeah.
think that's such a great point. Scott asked a really good question. He asked, excuse me, he asked, how has your understanding of what it means to be a good steward evolved over time? What lessons from other phases helped prepare you for the role of king? Do you feel like you've reached this stage? Scott, thank you for always packing 3 questions into one. Love
Right.
it so much. Fredo, I'm going to softball this one to you to start
Oh
since you were the
Lord.
most king age of the group.
Well, thank you. How has it evolved over time? Yeah, so understanding of a steward. So a working principle I have for myself is this: if I don't have it yet, I'm not ready for it. If I don't have it, I'm not ready for it. So that's how I think about my stewardship. If I don't have it, I'm not ready for it.
Wow,
And
that's good.
so, and that for me has been derived right out of Jesus's teaching, around those who can show themselves worthy of some things will be given more things. And so I think often about in my own life, if I don't have it, that means I ain't ready for it. And I got to
Yeah.
defer as Jesus is Lord and not me, and just embrace, the implications of living with what I think I should have, but I don't have right now. So that's kind of been the evolution of stewardship for me. Certain phases I think have just come from watching other people ahead of me do it and
Mhm.
learning from them.
Mhm.
Getting humble just enough to ask questions around how they do it.
Yeah.
Um, like just trying to be open to things that I don't know. Um, and then his last part, do I feel like I've reached that stage? I don't know. I don't know if I have. I think I'm learning to get to that point. So Zach, right after, asked a great question on the litmus test. The question, are the people under you flourishing? I think is a good marker if you're a king. And so I think that's kind of what I'm focused on now. If I've arrived or if I've reached this stage, I think a good sign that I've reached this stage will be that the people under my care are flourishing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of where I find myself right now. So, but yeah, I guess
I
that's
agree. I think it's
so.
super convicting. I think it's very proven out for me. Like I think that's just true.
Mhm.
I think about great leaders that I've had. I consider them great because I flourished underneath them. And I think about leaders that I look back on and I would think were not great leaders. They're primarily concerned with their kingdom, not
Mhm.
concerned with or maybe the size or scope of their kingdom, not necessarily who's all a part of their kingdom. You
Mhm.
Mhm.
know,
That's good.
um, yeah,
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that if I don't have it, I'm not ready for it. That needs to be on a t-shirt or a hat or something. That might that might be Pastor Fredo's next business adventure because that is
Yeah.
a bar and a half right there. That's good stuff right there.
Go ahead and write me a check, and be happy to explain more.
I'm just gonna slightly change the wording so that I can,
Yeah.
claim it as my own.
Yeah.
is that one going on someone's bedpost along with last week? What Brian was talking about with
Yeah, yeah. It should. It should go on. It should go on mine. Man.
Well, this has been great. Thank you guys. Yeah, what a powerful episode. I feel like this is just so much richness out of this. I hope if you're watching this later that this is, blessing you as well as it's been blessing for us on stream today.
Yeah.
Chat, thank you for jumping in, sharing your thoughts and your questions. We will be back next week for chapter 8 and the conclusion of this book, the conclusion of our reading. Join us again here on YouTube, 4:30 p.m. PST, California time, whatever you want to call it. Outside of that, any other final thoughts or
Tyler, thanks
words?
for being with us, man. Thanks for your insights. It was
Thanks for
great to
having
hear.
me.
Great to hear your perspective. And yeah, we got 1 week left. We're gonna wrap up Fathered by God, talking about the sage, and then his last section on intentionality. So it should be good.
Yeah.
McKay, do we have, like, we're talking about the sage next week. Do we have like maybe like the oldest person that we know to like step into
Maybe.
that, or
Yeah, well, I have my personal sage is going to be
Ah.
stepping on the show with us, which I'm really excited for. I actually find it hilarious because you quoted Uncle Ben, and that's his all-time superhero favorite. He loves Spider-Man more than anyone else I know. So I'm really excited for him to be on next week. You do not want to miss it. Please,
Yeah.
please jump in live. It'll be a great time.
Sounds
Eliana, it
good.
was great to see you. Thanks for joining us today too. She said thanks, guys, in the chat.
Yes, thank you, Eliana,
chat,
Chris,
as always,
Morgan,
you were rich.
Zach.
Thank you, chat.
YouTube and Facebook. Sorry, Facebook, we'll be live here as well. We stream to
Yes,
both
yeah.
platforms. With that, happy Tuesday. Have a blessed rest of your evening.